And we're live. Another edition of the Johnny and Gene Show. I'm Felix Levine, to my right, John Alite and Gene Borello. Before we get into it today, another quick reminder to like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel if you haven't done so already, and subscribe to our brand new Patreon channel. We put all our content up there early. We have bonus Q&As just for the Patreon, and then, of course, the ability to contact these two directly and ask them all the questions you want. And then lastly, we also have just updated our catalog for all our audio podcast versions. So you'll find every iteration of the episodes that you find here on YouTube, on Spotify, and Apple's podcast app. So make sure you go there if you want to listen, and also rate and review the show 5 stars there. And then a big shout out to KCL Automotive. John will tell you about it in a second, and then I'll give you the phone number if you want to get in touch.
KCL Automotive is 98 Henry Street, East Stroudsburg, PA. And we do inspections, auto work, auto body, tires, used cars, and buy here, pay here for people that don't have credit. Mention us and you have 10% off.
And go to or call 570-534-8497 if you want more information and get in touch with them. So today, people hound us in the comments with Sammy this, Sammy, get Sammy. And I think people really want to hear your take on, what he's doing today. I know he has a brand new podcast that he's starting. He puts a lot of great videos up, and I'll let you kind of talk about that.
For the people that ask, I've told them over and over again, eventually I'll be on and do something with Sammy. Sammy will be on with us. We are friends, and he's got his own show coming out, his own podcast coming out, and it's going to be the life of Sammy Gravano, on the boss of the Gambino family. And he's going to run through some of the topics that everybody keeps asking me about. And eventually, I guess, when his show comes out, afterwards, we'll be speaking about some of these shows. But one of the main topics everybody's hounding us about is I did Crime Watch about the Paul Castellano hit. And we went back to the scene of Spark Steakhouse. Sammy's doing the anniversary of the hit of Castellano, which I believe is about 35 years now. And he's going to get into the details of, for the first time ever, who the exact shooters are, what the plan was, and he's going to detail from start to finish that hit as a Christmas special, and he's going to go into his life history and his other shows. Me and Sammy met, we talked, and so you're going to have to wait, the people that are asking. And we're friends. So that, for the people that are asking, where do we stand on me and Sammy and Gene and Felix doing a show with them, I guess everybody's going to have to wait.
Got nothing but respect for the guy. He was the underboss of one of the most powerful organizations in the world. And, he's doing the right thing now.
We have done several shows, and people know that have seen me do shows on Reels or different shows. I obviously speak well of Sammy. I speak the history of what happened with our family. I speak about John Gotti Sr. and some of the interactions I had with him, how I feel about him, the nightlife people were asking about. We just did a show about that, on the nightlife of John Gotti and how he was to go party with. And I went into detail that he was a fun guy to go out with, and that'll be on some of the shows that'll be coming out also. But going back to the Paul Castellano hit, it was probably one of the most violent eras of mob history, the 70s and 80s. And so the guys that don't understand, because you're coming from this era, how many murders, we were dropping bodies and shooting people, not monthly or yearly, but daily. It was a different era that some of the younger guys can't comprehend, the violence that ensued between all our families, amongst each other, with each other, and against other crews and people that were trying to come and infiltrate into the Mafia. And Paul Castellano's hit happened to be one of many that dictated the history of what was going to go on with the 5 families in New York and in the United States.
And so I've actually never even really had that many conversations with you about Sammy, even off air. So I'm more curious, when did you guys first meet? And I guess, what was that like? 'Cause I'm sure a lot of people would love to hear about you guys' interactions and how that came about.
Sammy flew into town and me and a couple of guys that were involved with Sammy in the past, without mentioning names. They want their names out of the limelight and not disclosed. They're not into any of this media or television. And we sat and we talked, we laughed, we joked, we talked about some of the past. Had a coffee, had a couple of waters, and we just talked for hours. And the usual banter back and forth between guys, and the guys that were involved with him. A lot of these guys still have the utmost respect for him. So it was it was a fun time like you would do
When was this?
when he just first came home. So it's got to be about a year ago at this time, I guess.
Oh, wow. So that's pretty recent.
Yeah, he's only been home.
Only been home a little
Wow.
while.
Yeah,
Wow.
so he hasn't been home.
And what was, I mean, like the first time you had heard of him back in your Mafia days, what was like the common idea of who Sammy the Bull was?
Well, like I said on a lot of shows, on interviews I did about Sammy, I said that, he was a well-respected guy. Obviously, he was a made guy. He started off with the Colombo family, for the people that don't know. And he transferred over later on to the Gambino family. And he worked his way up until he was in a position of underboss. And he was known to be a money maker, quiet guy, and a guy that got involved and got his hands dirty. So Sammy was a guy that was respected around all five families. He had a lot of connections in other crews also, and he's been around the mob world forever. So he's got a reputation through the mob, and we're going to leave it to Sammy how he does his podcast and explains the history of what went on and why he decided to cooperate. And I've addressed this on other shows, and I think people already have my take on that. And we'll see what he has to say on his podcast. I'm interested myself on exact details of some of the things I don't have knowledge about that he'll bring out during his podcast and his shows.
And Gene, what was, during your era, what did people think of Sammy the Bull when that name was brought up?
Well, a lot of people, our era, said bad things about him, but I know a lot of the old timers that, talk about him, murderer, killer. Everybody's scared to death of him. My grandfather told me people are scared to look at him. So, that's why when people say this stuff about him, like, guys won't even look at him. So,
In this area, it's very easy for these guys. And I've said, we keep saying it over and over again. What man is going to go, a street guy or a tough guy, is going to go on internets and Instagrams and type nonsense, first off. Second, most of them type under fake names or no pictures. And if they're that tough, they put their picture up, they'd put their address up, and they'd say exactly who they are. You still ain't going to get respect, but you get a little bit more respect saying, well, at least he's saying who it is.
Right.
That's saying it, and he's saying where he lives, and he's putting his face behind it. But nowadays, you get to be a coward behind a camera or a link or a computer somewhere.
Right.
And, they troll people. And that's just out of jealousy, hate, and envy for the most part.
And also, he's Mafia history. The things that he was a part of is all history of the Mafia, like the biggest events. Paul Castellano's hit was probably the biggest hit ever in the Mafia.
So speaking of that, I guess are there some details that or do you remember what you were doing or what your reaction was at the time that the hit on Paul Castellano was?
Yeah, I mean, there's things obviously that Sammy didn't know that I knew of because of the Gottis, and I knew the hit was coming. I mean, for the people, I don't know if it was on our show I addressed this, but on other shows, I was at a Lucchese guy's house eating dinner, waiting for it to happen. And, when it happened, it was all over the news. But they were trying to get the okay from Neil Della Croce at the time, who was dying of cancer in a hospital. He wouldn't give the okay. So the moves to kill Paul was in effect for a while. And the excuse was because Paul had the tapes of the Gotti regime selling drugs and got caught, and that whole storyline that Sammy, I guess, will get into. And I had my take of really what went on there. I think John was just smart enough to use that excuse of the drugs, and Paul wanted the tapes because Paul had 2 cases pending at that time. In my belief, and Paul wasn't hitting anybody. Roy DeMeo was one of his soldiers and was one of Paul's personal killers. Was just hit by Paul, so he didn't have the luxury of having Roy do that hit
That
at
was a
the
dumb
time.
move of him of doing that.
Well, he thought
Dumb
that
move.
that
They were all
Roy
scared
was
of Roy.
compromising
Yeah,
him
they were all scared of
in
Roy.
2 other cases, but in one other case. But he had 2 other cases. He had the commission case at the time, Paul. But I think John just used that as a tool to step into a position that he wanted. And he took something that was negative that was going on to make it turn it into something positive by hitting Paul. And I think whatever he said to Sammy and the other guys, I don't think that's exactly what was on John's mind. I don't believe that he feared Paul was going to hit anybody at that time. The only thing I think Paul might have tried to do was shelve them, take them down.
Hey, let me ask you something. Your opinion, and I want a lot of guys to ask me this. Do you think they kill Paul if Roy DeMeo and his crew are still together?
Yeah, I don't think it had anything to do with Roy being together or not. I think it had more to do that Paul had 2 criminal cases at the time. So at the time, Paul had 2 RICO cases coming. And if anybody thinks logically about this, Paul wasn't going to go unscathed through these cases. And he was going to go to jail like everybody else got taken down on, on that case, on the commission case. So I think that John knew that. I just think John knew Paul wasn't going to hit anybody. I never believed that. I just think that he would have shelved them prior. And depending on who was going to take over, if it was going to be Tommy Bellotti, then Tommy probably would have never took him off the shelf. But if it came somebody else, they would have took him off the shelf. So I think it was John's move. Just used it. He knew he had Paul cornered at that time, and John was very street savvy and smart. For the people that think that John wasn't, he might have talked too much. He might have did some things that were outlandish. But as a street guy, he's nobody's dummy. He knew how to maneuver the street, and he smelt the. It's like being in a ring. When you clip somebody and you know he's hurt, you go for the kill. John knew he was hurt. John went for the kill, and he succeeded in doing what he wanted to do. I think it was one of the smartest moves on his part because he had him weak and vulnerable, and it was a good time for him to take over the family. So I don't believe that John really believed in his heart that Paul was killing him.
Did you have many interactions with Castellano?
No, but I went to Paul's house a couple times prior to that Christmas with John and with Bobby Borriello and John. So, and I was in the know at that time that they were trying to get Neil's permission. For the people that don't know, that's out there. Angelo Ruggiero was the one that got caught on most of the wires. And Neil's nephew was Angelo Ruggiero, who did bring John into the mob. And that's how John gets straightened out through Angelo Ruggiero. So for people out there weren't understanding why the power Neil Croce wielded, big power. If he gave the okay, which he wouldn't give, and when he died is when the hit happened. So,
what was Paul? Did he live lavishly? I mean, you talk about going to his house for Christmas. Was that? Was he flamboyant with his money the way some other guys were?
No, Paul was a businessman. He conducted himself as such. But actually, an Albanian guy bought Paul Castellano's house, and he threw a party for Hillary Clinton when she was running back in 2016 at that house. And he turned that Paul Castellano, they used to call it the White House because of the poles in front of the house. But he kept it as it was a beautiful house, but it was modest compared to what the guy Sal, the Albanian, just done to the house now. It's what you would call a mansion and something that's very elaborate.
How did you think that the hit on Paul Castellano then altered kind of mob history from that point on?
Well, once that happened, there was several of our guys that started getting hit from the Lucchese and the dirty cops at Bolito.
Genovese too, right?
And you have the Genovese involved, and you have the car bombing where Frankie DeChico dies. You have Eddie Lino that gets hit in Brooklyn on the way home by the detectives, and you have Bobby Borriello gets hit in front of his house. Before that, you had Shorty that got hit around that time, unrelated to the mob stuff at Bedrocks. So you had a lot of soldiers getting hit, and it put the whole mob on blast, obviously hitting a sitting boss in front of Sparks' house during Christmas season. I believe it was December 16th, if I'm exact memory of the day, at rush hour is no little feat. and it was known worldwide, not just in the United States, which put every institute and every mob crew and family on the police, DEA, FBI, and national security's list of this country. So it was something that just really at the end, it was a blunder because it took down Gotti, it took down the mob, it took down soldiers in every family because of the notoriety of that brought to the mafia. It just brought it to another level. It was brilliant, like I said in one part, but the way it was done, I think, was a huge mistake, being it done in Manhattan like that, so brazen.
What do you think would have happened if he hadn't been hit? Do you think,
If he wasn't hit, I think he would have probably shelved Gotti. He would have shelved Angelo, obviously. He wasn't killing them, in my opinion. And
Yeah, but
history would have
Gotti
changed.
ended up shelving Angelo, didn't he?
No, after the hit, Gotti actually elevates Angelo
But
to
then
skip
shelved
him
him later on, didn't he?
later on, and there's over other things. They use this, if it was over to Castellano, over the drug dealing, he never elevates Angelo to skipper. So
Right.
that's not true either. He moved him up, and then later on, he has some differences, and one of them is the
Gas
attempt
pipe.
on gas pipe,
Yes, right.
and I think I'm not sure. I don't think Angelo would have put that half-ass hit on gas pipe without John's knowledge. I think maybe John was mad the way it was conducted, and Heidel tried to hit him like an amateur without any team of guys. And I think some of that, that's another show that we can talk about. But the way it was done with a killer like gas pipe is one of the biggest mistakes ever. And Danny Marino, Heidel was Danny Marino's nephew, which Danny Marino, when they have Heidel tied up, went to gas pipe and put his hands up like, I guess, do what you want with him. So they tortured him and killed him.
Do you think that the hit on Paul Castellano is the biggest in mob history?
No, there's other hits besides. I mean, that's modern, if you call it modern day in 85, 80, so almost 86. But no, there's other hits like Galante's hit.
That's the only
and,
one that compares to
Yeah,
Coppola.
yeah. I mean, but there's hits
Albert
besides that,
Anastasia.
Albert Anastasia.
I mean, those are the biggest ones of all time, usually.
I mean, these are big names.
These are big bosses,
And the thing is, at the time when you hit Paulo is
Paul's is the most known
because of the commission case,
Yeah.
and the things that were going on. So,
Do you think when you said, so I believe it is December 16th, do you guys know, or did you have an idea that it would be that specific day, or do they know that the hit is out, but you don't know when exactly it's going to happen? How's that process for people out there that are wondering?
no, there was only very few people that had the know-how that this was going to happen. I was with Gotti on their inner circle.
How many people would
so
you say knew?
Probably 10 guys, and which is a lot.
Right.
Don't get me wrong. It's a ton of guys to know. But the know-how guys of what was going to happen was Sammy, was Angelo, was John, was Johnny Koenig, who's family member basically like me, very close with the family. Tony Roach, I grew up with them. Vinny Toro, I believe was his gun that jammed. Sally and Eddie Lino, which is very, very close to the Gottis and big heroin guys and movers, so they're involved. And his son obviously knew. I met myself. There wasn't too many more guys in that, so it's pretty tight, but it ain't that tight actually. When you're talking about 10 guys, if each guy opens their mouth to one guy, now 20 knows. So it's a lot of guys to know on a hit, because of the typical hit. You get a guy to steal your car. You don't tell him exactly what that's for. You get a guy to pick up your guns. You get two or three guys that go on the hit. Sometimes you have one guy in another car. But, you bring a typical hit team, 5 guys in the old days before all these laws changed. And as time changed, you bring 3 guys, 2 shooters and a driver.
Yep.
You try to keep it as tight as possible so guys don't flip and they don't have the knowledge and it doesn't leak out there.
Was there a specific desire to make it, like the location and
The best way to get them, usually guys will say.
Well,
Whatever's the best way.
but with Paul Castellano, because of the name, was there any intention on making it, because I think there's that famous photograph.
Element of surprise. That's what I.
Listen, they have it, one of the things is Paul eats at Sparks. So he chose the location. And prior to that, actually, there was a date prior to that he changed the date. And I'm not even sure if Sammy knows that, but he changed the date prior to that. There was a meeting prior to that he changed it for whatever reason. And, you know, to me, I don't know why they hit him at Sparks. I'm not sure. But if the FBI is watching everybody and you're meeting and they bring a tail with them by accident, you're caught right at the scene. And so if you're worried about that, why not just hit him back at his house where it's quiet and he's got to come home. So I'm not sure why exactly they chose that location. Besides, they wanted to make a statement. Sometimes when you're killing somebody, you leave them on the street for a statement.
Yeah.
What that statement was is obviously pretty apparent, that John didn't give a fuck. And he was telling everybody, you know, that I'm John Gotti, and yeah, this is to everybody. Now, the problem with that is the guys that accept it is, nobody's been arrested ever for the Paul Castellano hit. So this is going to be very interesting what Sammy talks about.
What thought they were charged with? John was never charged with a senior?
I don't believe
I
so.
thought he was charged with it. The Castellano murder. No?
He might have been charged. Nobody's convicted of it.
Okay.
I don't think there's no convictions on that Castellano hit. I'm just curious why not with Sammy as speaking about those hits. So
Probably
it's
just
going to be
him saying
interesting
it.
what he has to
Right, yeah.
say. Really, even for me, it's going to be interesting.
Well, I guess be on the lookout for Sammy's episode, our episode, of course. I think that's it. I don't know if you have anything else to say on that subject. I think a lot of people have questions, and we'll answer them on our Q&A, again, on our Patreon. If you guys want to get directly in touch with these two and ask them all your questions, get shout-outs from them, subscribe to our Patreon. The link is in the description of this video.
I want to wish everybody a happy holiday. It doesn't, if we don't go back on. This week, there'll be a Forbes article out. I believe it's about 10 pages on my life and my life involved with a friend of mine. I think we're going to read it over the air on our next show that we'll also put out. Should be about 10 pages from what I understand. And it'll address some of these things, actually, that we were just talking about and some other interesting things. And we'll make it available on the show. I think I'll read the article on the show after it comes out.
Gene, where can they follow you?
Gene Borello now.
Good. John?
True John Alite.
And you have a website?
www.johnalite.com.
And for myself, at felix.levine on Instagram. And I believe that's it, gentlemen.
All right, everybody. Have a Merry
Thank you so
Christmas.
much.
Yeah, man.
Thank you.